This was television's first big climbing programme, an ambitious live broadcast featuring the best young climbers in Britain, including Chris Bonington.
The trouble is with this pit, I just keep bashing the radio the whole time. I think this
The young Bonington may have had a few technical problems, but the televised ascent of the old Man of Stoer was to bring him star status. The whole project had been dreamed up by Scotland's most charismatic climber, Dr. Tom Patey. And Tom Patey loved television almost as much as he loved climbing.
I'm aiming to save a bit of time by climbing up the rope instead of going up the rock. And I'm using these things, these jumas, they call them, sliding clamps. They're okay, providing you put them on the right way up. They'll only slide up, they won't pull back. Of course, if you put them on the other way around, the effect could be rather disastrous, I suppose.
Right, Tom,
Anyway,
wow.
we're just about to go off. I'm feeling rather like one of these American astronauts going into orbit, but this is an American device too, actually, this Juma. Well, here we go. We're into space. Let's hope Chris has fixed that rope well up above. Here we go, folks. By gosh, there's quite a stretch in this nylon rope. Anyway, I'm still here, which is perhaps the most important thing.
Tom Patey died 3 years later, abseiling off another sea stack. He was only 38. It had been a short life, but a very full one. Caring for other people's health, but not his own, Dr. Tom somehow managed to combine general practice with hard climbing, and climbing with music and song. An entertainer on and off the mountains, he's best remembered for the spectacular climbs he made all over Scotland. During his Scottish Odyssey, he made many first ascents. One of the most surprising was the Cioch Nose on Sgwr a Chorachin. Mountaineers are judged by the climbs they make and the friends they leave behind them. In Patey's case, there is no shortage of either. Martin Boyson and Chris Bonington often partnered Tom Patey, and as a tribute to his memory, they chose to follow his route up the Cioch Nose at Applecross. In far from ideal weather with wet rock and poor visibility, Martin Boyson leads the first pitch. Unlike his more famous partner, Boyson has always shunned the limelight.
It wasn't like this when we did it, Martin. No, it wasn't like this when I last did it either. Probably weren't quite so much gear either. Oh, it's the rocks. Good light. A foul layback there.
Back in 1960, when Chris Bonington had partnered Patey on the first ascent of the Cioch Nose, conditions had been very different.
I remember it was a blazing hot day. I remember that we'd really psyched ourselves up to climb it because, I mean, it looks phenomenally steep and phenomenally hard. And, I mean, even to the point that we actually put the rope on, kind of right from the word go. And then I can remember that the kind of extraordinarily bubbling kind of discovery that, God, this is easy, and that you were climbing in this incredibly kind of dramatic kind of situation with these superb holes that your hands kind of went round, and one just shot up it, and there was an extraordinary sense of kind of elation.
It's fairly cold, it's getting better though. I'm getting used to it.
Tom Patey is a hard act to follow. Whilst possessing the hands and talent of a trained musician, he used his natural strength with great efficiency on the rock face. Patey's appetite for new routes was enormous. Potential climbs were marked on a map in the garden shed and chronicled in a notebook.
He had this black book where he had this huge number of new routes inscribed, or possible new routes, possible lines, both in Scotland and also in the Alps. And occasionally, if you were very privileged, you'd actually be allowed to look at the book.
The Manreachan buttress was another one of Tom's crags which he had in his black book, which there were no routes on it, and I remember sort of trying to find out where this huge crag was, and eventually sort of stumbling on it and doing routes on that, and Tom was really outraged that you know, we'd actually managed to get to this crag before he'd shown it to us.
Where do we go? Always select the easiest line, the chimney, I would say. Although I don't suppose you remember a thing about it.
It's one of these things where you... I think where everything is slightly wet and dank.
Remember Patey's wonderful article about apes and ballerinas? I'm a geriatric ape.
I was 24 at the time, and Tom, I suppose, was about 3-4 years older than me. And we had this incredible fortnight. And at that stage, I barely knew him, so I was really getting to know him at the same time. And he was very much the driving force. It was immense fun climbing with Tom, and I think that's the richness of the memory.
You look as though you enjoy putting your hand in that.
It's all wet and cold and horrible.
Foul orifice.
The thing is, you never knew what was going to happen. It was completely unexpected the whole day. You just never knew where you were going to go, what you were going to do, where you were going to end up, and it was just fantastic fun.
Oh, nicely, Chris.
Good.
Now opens up. Well, I think you're going to get the really nice pitch, Martin.
Oh, good. The lucky stone worked. Are you going to be late, Chris?
Just in a second.
Okay.
I'll put a runner in to protect you, not if you'll need it.
Okie doke.
Up in the mountains, Patey said, a man got closer to his God. It was a rare religious statement from someone who was born a son of the manse.
You ready, Chris? Okay, I'm ready to climb now. Okay.
I just can't remember whether I led this one or whether Tom did.
Memories fade with time, but Martin Boyson recalls how he motored to Scotland to try and prize Patey away from his patients.
I just came up here on spec, wondering if he had any free time to climb, and he said, right, we've got 4 hours before the next surgery. He said, but they mustn't see that I'm going out climbing, so he drove off and pretending to be on a visit. And then we stopped and walked up to the fiddler, and he went once again hurtling off, soloing up once again, all the time looking at his watch, saying, not long to go, not long to go, until fortunately he got stopped at the last section, which was a desperate steep crack, which he brought me up and says, I think this is your country, this one, gritstone. It's just a gritstone crack, and that was that. Then hurtled back down, back into his chute, and off to the surgery. And that was sort of typical of the sort of days you'd have with Tom.
What Tom Patey brought to British climbing was a boundless energy. His enthusiasm had no limits.
They were totally unique times that could never ever be repeated. And I think it's with so many of your friends, it is this kind of, it's the immense sense of loss of the enjoyment and the fun that you had, that you could have, that you'd like to go on having. And I think that's where one will always, I mean, with Tom, have a sense of fondness and a sense of kind of gosh, you know, what good times I could be having now. And little things happen, or you come to a place and you see somewhere where you've done something, some memory of what you've done with Tom comes up.
Of all the Patey routes, the one most frequently remembered is his solo climb on Craig Mechy, which has gone down in mountaineering history as Crab Crawl. Craig Mechy's northeastern face offers the longest traverse found on any British mountain. Soloing it seems the height of folly, but Tom Patey said it was like cruising down the motorway after being held up by Glasgow's traffic lights. Yet what a journey, crawling sideways like a crab. It even impresses hard mountaineers like Mick Tighe.
Things were very different in those days, actually remarkably different. Some of the gear they were using kind of seems almost Victorian. A guy that was around at the same time as Patey was Don Willans, and we've got a Willans sack, which Patey had one of these almost exactly. We're wearing knee-length breeches, leather boots of course, and Patey was renowned for having odd socks as well. We've also got rather interesting here, it was the era when wooden shafted axes were going out. We've got an original McInnes Massey hammer, which in fact Patey himself used to use, Hamish tells us, you know.
It's quite antique, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a rare old piece of kit, that. These were very similar to the actual crampons that Patey himself had, 10-point crampons with leather straps. All this stuff I've seen a photograph of him actually using and wearing around that era.
Using 60s equipment, Mick Tighe sets out to recreate Patey's most bizarre climb.
Crab Crawl, which I've now done, or twice in fact, is definitely a very serious climb. One could argue with the lack of belays and you know, natural protection along the climb, the best way to do it would be to solo it, because if you were climbing with a partner, there's a fair chance if you fell you'd probably take your partner with it. So in that case maybe he was approaching it extremely sensibly, but there's no doubt that it's an unusual and very major and very serious undertaking. When you get out there on that big main face above the Lochan on Craig Mechy, then it's unbelievable situation, unbelievable. And it's something that you don't quite encounter on a straight up and down route, because you are not quite aware of the drop, whereas where you're continuously traversing pitch after pitch, then you just get that feeling of space below your feet. It's quite incredible. I thought it was really a little bit of following in Patey's footsteps, a little bit of history being reenacted, and definitely getting into the character of the man as much as somebody who never knew him could do.
The kind of climbing that really caught Patey's imagination was found here on the west coast of Scotland, where he earned a nickname of Dr. Stack after climbing a number of these high, imposing sea stacks like the old Man of Stoer.
The trouble with climbing sea stacks is that you've got to cross water to get to them, and Tom Patey was no swimmer. Hence the use of a 30-foot ladder to bridge the channel, a different kind of crawl from the one on Craig Mechy. Crossing by rope is no problem for an ex-commando action man like Mick Tighe. Tighe is linking up with Patey's original partner, Paul Nunn, to reconstruct their 1966 ascent of the Old Man of Stoer. The original climb was done in a tremendous hurry. Dr. Patey had to get back to Wallerpool for evening surgery, but as Paul Nunn says, that was Patey all over.
The thing about him, he had a vast appetite for experience. You know, it was climbing, people, amusement, seeing the odd and quirky sides of things. He was greedy for experience, and it was difficult. I don't think he could stop himself. He just had to keep going.
The old Man of Stoer was thought to be invincible until Patey came along. A short horizontal traverse, followed by a long vertical pitch, a weaving scramble past overhanging rock, and a chimney climb to the top, and all done in time for dinner.
Well done, sir. Bloody well on the fingers, Thank God for that sun, eh? It's quite a convoluted route because you reach the plinth underneath the back wall of the stack, and then the first pitch is a horizontal traverse, which is actually quite stiff, quite difficult, and it ends up on a big shelf on the other corner of the stack. Then there's a rather beautiful slab that leads up to a ledge above. A steeper section, which is actually one of the harder parts of the climb, follows in a pitch 3, a third rope length, to a cave, a kind of a place on the edge, and then a not very obvious traverse leads back right onto the landward side, into the middle of that rather fearsome-looking wall, and out up to some crack lines that eventually bring you out onto the side. Well, I was really dragged in from the street, as it were. I mean, I happen to know this Scot, Brian Robertson from Edinburgh, and I think he had some plan to do this, but he hadn't actually told us. I mean, we climbed in Glencoe and then came up to Tom's, but there was no mention of what we were actually coming to do, and it was all a bit of a mystery. You know, we just ended up driving up here, and Tom going and collecting a ladder in Stoer, and just hiking off over some hills. I mean, and it's only really at that stage that we began to realise what it was all about. Nearly there, mate. Nice climbing, Paul.
Every first ascent is graded for difficulty. The old Man of Stoer is rated very severe, although Tom Patey thought it was easier than that.
I wouldn't wedges you boys on the first ascent, did you?
No.
You have any, no? No? Right, see what we can do, eh? It's supposed to be the hard bit, this, so here we go on.
I think Tom thought this was severe.
Did he? He thought everything was severe, didn't he?
Yep.
Here's that.
He expected people to keep up with him as long as they could, and when they fell behind, he left them. I mean, that was sometimes true. And I don't mean in dangerous places, really, but he could go extremely fast. You know, he's a brilliant mountaineer. This is the point about him, really. He wasn't just a rock climber. And he loved just to move freely on the mountains.
Oh, just a wee traverse across to the ledge. Right, that's me on the ledge, Paul.
right, I think. It's jug over the top. Yeah, it's okay. I can put one in anyway. I think that'd be a good idea.
Might be handy to put the rope swinging out.
Yeah. I don't think this one's going to budge. Put lead in that.
Okay, right. Have you up round the corner now, is it?
Yeah.
Right.
That'll be it.
Down
What?
there, we'll be out of sight round there.
I think we're going down to the sun as well. That should be a pity.
Well, I see that now. Just move this friend up a little bit, it's better higher up. That's quite a good runner now. Bit greasy at the top here, Paul.
Tom Patey was a 60s hero. By climbing as hard as he drank and cracking jokes even with a hangover, Patey became a legendary figure. And 24 years after his death, the legend is undiminished.
I think why Patey is such a lovable character in British folklore is his sense of adventure and his carefree attitude. And you know, we're all running around and we've got about 1,000 times more runners and belay devices than these boys had on the first ascent. But I mean, which is the best way? I don't know. This carefree attitude is perhaps frowned upon, but you know, there's some of us who quite like a little bit of adventure now and then, you know.
About 23 to the top, Paul. Running in a minute. Okay, Paul, on belay. Coming! On the bloody top!
When he climbed the old man with Patey, Paul Nunn never got to the top. Tom was in too much of a rush to wait for him.
Big step there. Big step for mankind, eh? Ah, just a wee one for old Nunn, eh? Stand by.
Hey.
Cracker.
Great.
Whoa. Very well done, boy. How many
Well.
years since the first ascent?
28 years.
28 years, eh? Cheers, Paul. Smashing.
Well, started holidays, eh?
Capping Paul Nunn's long career as a climber has been the presidency of the British Mountaineering Council. But his saddest moment was on another sea stack off the coast of Sutherland, when Tom Patey's wonderful life came to an abrupt end.
I'd seen accidents before, but never to people I liked as much as Tom, or had come to feel relatively close to. And it was a sort of coming of age. You know, there was a feeling that it took part of the golden glow away. I mean, there was a joyfulness about Tom, which just wasn't there when he'd gone.
I just couldn't believe that he had died. You know, I kept expecting to see him. You know, you go into a pub, go to somewhere, and you think, I'm going to see. Oh, that looks like Tom, and then you think, remind yourself, no, he's dead.
It was a sense of immense sadness, and I mean, it just comes. I mean, with all too many of your climbing friends, and I think with Tom particularly, it was a sense of good times lost.
Ah, great feeling. Exhilaration. Ah, magnificent. That's a tremendous feeling of exhilaration up here. It's like being a little satellite suspended out in space. It's dropping away into nothingness on every side.